កម្មវិធីកិច្ចសន្ទនាកម្ពុជានិងពិភពលោក
Good evening, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Cambodia Global Dialogue or Southeast Asia TV. Tonight I have the pleasure to have once again my two good friends. This time we're going to change the topic a bit, something more futuristic. What to expect when Cambodia graduates from its least developed country status. To a lot of us, we keep seeing a lot of this economic report, World Bank, IMF say, ADB say, well, Cambodia now move up from a low income country to a low middle income country. Growth rate is it's a phenomenal for the last 2 decades, that sort of thing. But I don't think people realize that there's a big difference between the World Bank nomenclature and the UN nomenclature. So I think tonight we have an opportunity to hear a bit from the expert. And Nick, welcome.
Thank you, Siphana.
Yeah, welcome once again. And Sven, welcome. But anyway, I'm going to let you gentlemen introduce yourself a bit, and then we can carry on the dialogue. Nick?
Hi, my name is Nick Beresford. I'm Country Director with UNDP Cambodia here in Phnom Penh.
Sven?
Good evening, and thanks again for the invitation. Always a pleasure. My name is Sven Kalabo. I'm a trade policy advisor by profession. I support countries like Cambodia, Myanmar, and Laos in this region to better integrate into regional and international trade. Hence, my interest in this topic tonight.
Well, great. By the way, I'm also ex-UNDP. So we all the UN team, But let's start a bit first with the sort of definitional thing. Nick, can you sort of like give a good overview for laymen, not for economists? What
Explain it to normal people.
Yes, to normal
Right.
people, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so middle income country status and least developed country status are two completely different definitions run by two different bodies. So, okay, the first one is the low income, lower middle income, upper middle income, and high income, and that's run by the World Bank. And the World Bank measure GNI, and it's just a line. You just cross it.
GNI is?
Gross national income. And then as you cross that line, you graduate from one to another. It's automatic. There's no committee. There's no process really. Here in Cambodia, we crossed the line from low income into lower middle income in 2015, and that was recognized in 2016 when those figures came out from the bank.
Yes.
And worth emphasizing what a remarkable achievement that was. In that 15-year period, we'd seen the economy more than triple. We'd seen poverty more than half. It's a tremendous achievement. So that's one set of figures. Now another set of figures is run by United Nations ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council. And this one's a bit more complicated and a little bit more subjective. And this is whether you are defined as a least developed country or not. If you're defined as a least developed country, they look at three things. One, it's the GNI again. And then the other two are these composite indexes. One is the Human Asset Index.
Okay.
Looking at your education, looking at your health, your child mortality, things like this. The third is your Economic Vulnerability Index.
Okay.
Which is looking at, say, your location for trade, the stability of your imports and exports, and other criteria, how vulnerable you are to kind of economic shocks, if you like.
Yes.
And then there is also a kind of a third bit, which is a kind of a subjective, negotiated part, where the Council for Development Policy, that's the part of ECOSOC that deals with this, then will enter into negotiations with the relevant government, and then they'll make these decisions. They meet every 3 years, so it's a very gradual, very slow process. Now, the importance of the LDC status really is the trade benefits you get.
Okay.
So you don't have to do it. You can be a member of the World Trade Organization, but because of your LDC status, you don't have to obey all the rules. You're given some benefits,
Yes, yes.
which help you on exports, help you on trade, and help you grow your economy.
Yes, yes. Well, Sven, I mean, you've been traveling around the world to try to assist a country of similar status, graduate, preparing sort of like master plan or strategy, that sort of thing. Can you just share with us a bit how many country, by the way, how many country are LDC now? Sven?
Yes, well, to answer your question, I think the current number is 47 or 46 if you include the last country that graduated, which is Equatorial Guinea, graduated this year.
Yeah, okay.
Out of 51 countries. So this classification was started by the UN in 1971, and we are 46 years later, and not so many countries have graduated. This is one of the reasons why the criteria for graduation have been modified, I would say, not long ago, with the hope that by the end of this decade, by 2020, half of the remaining LDCs would be in a position to start the graduation process.
Okay.
What we have observed in the last few years is that a few countries are within sight of graduation,
including us,
including Cambodia, but Cambodia was not included in the 2015 review yet. While countries like Bhutan or Solomon Islands were included. But there are some countries that have been ready to graduate for a number of years, but either for domestic reason or for vulnerability to external shocks, they ask for a kind of waiver on appeal, not to graduate immediately, which is a bit strange. You say, well, I want my country to be recognized as a sovereign nation, as a developing economy, but when you get the opportunity to graduate, you say no.
That always puzzled me, that part.
Yeah. So not so many countries have graduated. So we are talking of, the first one was Botswana, a landlocked country in Africa.
Yeah.
And then you have three small island developing states, Cape Verde in Africa, Maldives, and Samoa.
Okay.
And recently Equatorial Guinea.
Okay.
So it doesn't give a lot of experience for Cambodia, because this country cannot compare to Cambodia. They're not in our region. But there are some very interesting lessons to learn from recently graduated countries.
Let's focus in our region. Who else in our region are LDC? I mean, talking in Asia.
Yeah. So among our immediate neighbors, we have Myanmar, of course, and our PDR. A bit further to the west, we have Bhutan and Nepal.
Okay.
Two countries that have been considered for graduation in 2015. I think Nick will come back on the criteria.
Yes.
And then we have a number of small island developing states like Solomon Island, Kiribati, Timor-Leste, Tuvalu, Vanuatu, who are almost ready to graduate. But those countries, for instance, in the Pacific have been affected by tsunami, by typhoon, which were reasons why they asked for a waiver for the this LDC graduation to be delayed.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Nick, Sven, you mentioned about the criteria. But in the case Cambodia, the talk of graduation has been sort of like simmering a bit, right? The last couple of years, right? And it's a lot of excitement when in 2016 when the World Bank announced that we are now in the lower middle income country. From UNDP perspective, how do you feel that? In that context, is Cambodia ready? Should we push toward graduation? Should we take a step back? What is your assessment?
Well, this is the big question, because on one level, no one wants to remain a least developed country. Why would you want to do that?
Which is an oxymoron in a way.
Yeah, and it's a matter of national pride. Yeah. It's and also a matter of development. I mean, if you're a country like Cambodia with a very successful economy, it's driving forward in terms of growth very well. It's bringing a lot of people out of poverty, and and you want to now, do more of the same. You don't want to remain in this LDC club, so to speak.
Yes.
But there are these big advantages. It's helping your exports.
Yes,
It's giving you preferential access.
Yes.
It means that in terms of copyrights and other rather complicated criteria that you would otherwise have to comply with under
Yes.
WTO rules, you don't
Yes.
have to. You get a free pass.
Okay.
So that's quite valuable.
Yes.
The good thing about the whole graduation process is it's not an automatic thing. It's not a just in
Yes.
out.
Yeah.
So the whole point of the process is to be able to have the negotiation and to think it through. So for instance, at the moment at UNDP, we're working with the Council for Development Cambodia and with others, looking precisely at this issue and consulting with government so that government gets to a good position. About how does it want to negotiate, what kind of concessions does it want to sort of give up early,
Yes.
ones it wants to keep later, so that it comes in with a strategy,
Yeah.
that works for Cambodia, that works for the Cambodian economy.
So basically, it's a negotiated situation vis-a-vis other development partner or trading partner that.
Exactly. You've got these three criteria: the human asset, the economic vulnerability, the GNI. But as well as that, there's also this negotiated part, with the Committee for Development Policy, and going in well prepared, well thought out about how you want to go and manage this graduation, because it will inevitably happen,
Yes,
which
yes.
is a good thing.
Yes, yes.
It means that the country's economy is going from strength
Yes.
to strength. But then you just want to get the timing right and you want to get the process right.
Yes, yes. Well, Nick, I think we're going to take a short break, but when I come back, I want you to make some linkage a bit between that process and, the Millennium Development Goal, which is now the Sustainable Development Goal. How does it, how this sort of like global indicator that Cambodia is committed to anyway, how does it fare? How does it support, directly or indirectly, our graduation negotiation process? All right. So we'll take a short break on that one. Well, Nick, okay, before we delve into the graduation process, perhaps I want to squeeze this short moment for you to tell us a bit, how we did in the MDG and how are we now preparing to move to the second phase, which is the SDG. Yeah.
Yeah, the MDGs and the SDGs are very different.
Yes.
I mean, first of all, in the MDGs, which came to a conclusion in 2015, Cambodia was a star performer.
Yeah.
It met those criteria in many cases years ahead. So MDG 1 on poverty, to halve poverty, it managed to do that 3-4 years before the 2015 deadline. So all eyes are on Cambodia now in the Sustainable Development Goal
Yes.
period to also show the same leadership.
How different is it?
The SDGs are, with the MDGs, it was more about crossing a line, and it was more, not quite arbitrary, but almost like a bunch of different indicators on child mortality, poverty, and so on. The SDGs is way more ambitious. It's way bigger. It doesn't say to reduce poverty, it says no poverty. It doesn't say about equality of men and women, it says complete gender equality, complete equality for girls and women, for boys and for men. And this is an order of magnitude bigger in terms of the ambition. And I think it has these very powerful political messages in it. And I think one of which is leave no one behind. You see, the MDGs, you could just get enough people over the line, you're okay. But the people who are lost behind the line, well, they didn't really feature.
Yeah.
This one, all of us are included. We all prosper. We all share in the success of the growth. And I think this, leave no one behind, is one of the most important concepts behind the SDGs.
Yeah, and then, so if we're doing well on this, by default, it will help us meet the criteria for graduation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got the human asset index, which looks at nutrition, health, education, and so on. And you look at the economic vulnerability, which looks at the stability of the economy in terms of exports and imports and so on. And if you are addressing the Sustainable Development Goals, which I think is even more ambitious,
Yes.
you are by default definitely addressing those criteria, those indexes for LDC graduation.
Yeah, you DP publish the Human Development Index. How well are we doing?
Cambodia has the 8th fastest Human Development Index growth in the world, which is really, really impressive. Particularly in terms of health and longevity, there's been great improvements over the past, say, 10, 15 years. It's one of I think it is the fastest in Asia Pacific. So, I mean, one thing to note about the growth in Cambodia, it's not just about income, GNI. It's actually about human development, and that's a real success story. This feeds directly back to the human asset index in the graduation criteria.
I want to turn to you, Sven, a bit on what Nick mentioned, but I want to focus more on the human dimension, but more so on entrepreneurship, young entrepreneurship, women entrepreneurship. Cambodia's entrepreneurial spirit is very, very high, and you can see in the market, in the street, in business, they're all over the place. And I think I link to the issue of diversification, economic diversification, because I think it's part of that sustainability, right? To be ready for external shock, you must have a strong economy in that sense. How are we doing in that area of diversification, the role of entrepreneurship in that? How are we doing there?
I mean, not only it's a factor, but it's a very important criteria for graduation.
Okay.
The capacity, the capability of your country to diversify its economy, moving into industry, light industry, heavy industry, into regional value chain, into services. Right? Maybe I give you two different aspects of it. If you look, for instance, at the current industrial development policy of the royal government of Cambodia, 2015 to 2025, what do we find in there? We find support to SME, transport logistics, we look into entrepreneurship. So those are really good examples of how Cambodia has already started to diversify. It is true that when you start discussing with your partners on the actual graduation, you want to have what we call a smooth transition process. This is the wording used, a smooth transition. And there you have to show to your partners how you're going to diversify your economy, moving into sectors as the one you mentioned. And I was 3 weeks ago, I was invited to this Cambodia startup policy hack, where Cambodia startup policy hack.
Yeah.
You get all these tech startup, youngster, French tech and Thai tech, etc., getting together under the roof of the Ministry of Post and Telecom to bring ideas. This kind of hackathon, where you bring ideas and to
in a positive way, not
to
the
support
hacking way.
The policy development, policy formulation by the government. And what we saw there was amazing in terms of startups created by Cambodian, and because there's not so much venture capital, angel funding in Cambodia, this is mostly from Cambodian sources. It's from Smart Axiata, Digital Innovation Fund, and this type of thing. So you have people creating entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs. Some are not even in their 20s, right? Developing the future economy of Cambodia. What is also important to notice is that all these graduated economies, they were very highly depending on one commodity to export. It can be, for instance, in the case of Maldives, or in the case of Samoa, it was fish. And in the graduation process, this period during which you have to present your strategy, they look into other sectors where they could diversify once they graduated. And the reason why is that once they graduate, they lose, as Nick was mentioning earlier, a lot of preferential access to markets, important markets, EU market, US market, China market, and you have to compensate that.
Yes.
Not by exporting more agricultural commodities, but by moving into higher value chain products, right? This is exactly where Cambodia is now.
Okay, so I think, of course, we are now in ASEAN, right? So we ASEAN has a very ambitious plan also in terms of development, reducing the development gap, a lot of program to assist SME in the e-commerce, that sort of thing. So I think it's a lot of thing that's happening by ASEAN member state, and ASEAN, of course, have very strong relation with our development partner. So in this context, Nick, how do you see in the graduating process, the preparation, the government, the private sector, the academia, the UN agency, development partner, how is it coming now? In terms of the preparation for that, have UNDP led the discussion on that?
Well, I think with the SDG agenda, that's helping to focus both private sector, government, NGO, civil society together, around this common set of values.
Yes.
And this feeds very much back into some of the criteria for the graduation, the LDC graduation. And I think that there is, a huge opportunity there, because it's also looking at a very different development model. It's looking at a development model that has a much better quality and is much more sustainable and is much more focused on the long term, so that locks in the growth.
Yes.
So, for instance, if you look at energy markets and energy production, so it would look at the opportunities with solar and solar power, both to reduce energy costs, because of this new technology coming on stream, but also to make cleaner power, that's less dangerous, that doesn't have the adverse health effects that we see in so many cities in South and Southeast Asia. These are real win-win policies, so it's not true, to say that, in order to have your environmental goal, you have to go and compromise necessarily on your development or your economic goal. If you're smart about putting these things together, within the Sustainable Development Goal framework, you can come up with these new policies that lock in a higher growth, but also with less risk, with a better environmental outcome, with a better health outcome, and so on. So these are the kind of things that that we in the UN are looking at with government and with private sector. I think before we were working very much kind of ODA comes in from a northern hemisphere rich country, it comes into a poorer country, and you do your development program, and it's all a little bit linear like that. Now I think it's much more blended finance models where there are private sector firms coming in wanting to work on various aspects, government with its own money. Look at the government now. Its revenue budget, its fiscal space this year is 6 billion. It's 20% higher than last year. It's got a lot more power, a lot more. It's taking the lead. And what's ODA? 1.3 billion. It's a lot smaller. So we were aid dependent maybe 10 years ago. Now we're trade dependent. It's a very different kind of outlook, so the relevance of this LDC graduation is really important. But then it speaks very nicely to this new sustainable development opportunity and way of thinking. So I think the UN is we're putting ourselves much more into working into these partnerships and creating these new strategies and these new dynamic models. Trade
dependency versus aid dependency, I like that, because as a former WTO negotiator, trade is very dear to me, and so is for you. In terms of trade now, how we're doing a lot of trade with the EU for sure, right? But it's also interesting that we have also other interesting markets like Canada, Japan, US, of course. But in ASEAN, we start to see quite an increase of intra-ASEAN trade as well. From your perspective in terms of trade diversification, whether it's having new product to export or having new market, I saw on the news a few months ago, Ministry of Commerce was involved with the Eurasia, economic area there. So how are we doing in terms of trade diversification?
Well, I think you have summed it up very well. Not only product diversification, meaning moving into putting more value in the product that are produced in Cambodia and exported from Cambodia outside, but also into market diversification, looking into other markets. And in the context of LDC graduation, this is very, very important because what happened when you graduate is that you would lose this preferential market access, meaning this tariff that is applied to other countries, your competitor, but it's not applied to you. You know? You talk about roughly for Cambodia around 10,000 product line that are exported without this duty-free, without this duty, this quota, so 0% tax when it goes to those markets. When you become a graduate country, all those not immediately, not overnight, are removed, right? So it means that over a period of 3 to 5 years, your product become 10, 15, 20% more expensive. So what happens now in Cambodia is that Cambodia is saying, well, we have to get ready for that, right? Cambodia is still dependent on garment exports and on export of garment to those countries where we have preferential market access. And this needs to evolve. In terms of where we export, the type of product we export, and not only through the tariff line, but also through our competitiveness. You know, Cambodian products have to be more competitive, cheaper. Right? And we also look into exporting other products to other markets where we can already be competitive, where those tariff lines are not applied. Right? You mentioned some of them, this Belarus and this Eurasia countries. So we are doing good, right? But it's not enough. We also have to look at our own cost of producing in Cambodia to become more competitive.
Well, I think another break is already due. But when we come back, we've been talking only on goods. I think we forgot on the service sector. I want to dwell a bit more on diversification of the service sector, how we can boost up a bit the revenue, because nonetheless it's revenue, it's job creation, it brings food on the table to many of our households. Well, Nick, life is not all about good. You know, economics is not all about trading good, everything. You know, in fact, during the WTO negotiation, when we say that, well, we invite different ministry who are covering the service sector, they say, well, you know, we're not trading good. Why you want to bother us? I say, brother, when you make a phone call, you know, when people make a phone call, you get money, right? The Ministry of Telecom make a few dollars from there, right? See, it's all about that. So I think tourism is quite, we hit 5 million last year, right? And many other service sector that is thriving. What's your view in terms of trade diversification, but focusing on the service sector?
Yeah, I think in the industrial development policy, it has it right by saying the need to diversify. I mean, and Sven's just mentioned this in the context of needing to go more into services. I think also as you go into services, you can go up value chains, you can go into new technologies. There's a lot to be had there. You know, you make yourself less vulnerable to shocks. You know, if you're only in one or two areas, you know, it's mostly textiles, ready-made goods, say construction and tourism, you know, then you're that much more vulnerable. You know, the more you spread out, then the more resilient you are. Also, services is a really great avenue for professional women to enter into. So, you know, women and girls, I think, also have a great role there in terms of that sector. It suits an urbanizing context that we see here, rapid urbanization. So there's a lot to be gained there. The government has put a lot of emphasis on TVET, on technical skills. There on education and those abilities. So, you know, that movement into the service sector, I think, you know, is essential.
And you know, there's now all this fourth industrial revolution. You know,
Right.
this young software engineer that Cambodia is producing now. I mean, who would have thought 10 years ago that we would have a software engineer? You know, when we have just this back office services just to scan a document, we were all excited 15 years ago. You say, my God, you know. But now these kids are actually developing software applications. Well, and then fintech,
Yes.
you know, all that sort of thing. So when your view on, say, for example, tourism
Yeah.
development?
Maybe on this area of services,
Okay.
yes, there is a lot of opportunity for Cambodians to diversify into more services.
Yes.
Cambodia very recently has started to be very active in this negotiation rounds on services in the
Okay.
ASEAN,
Yes.
as well as in the WTO. In services like you mentioned, tourism, logistics, transport, but also new sectors like 3D animations, like fintech,
Yes,
like
yes,
e-commerce.
yes.
And if I can use this opportunity to make an appeal, is that Cambodia under the WTO, the World Trade Organization, can access some markets in developed economies through a waiver, what we call the LDC, Services Waiver, which means that a services company in Cambodia can get a waiver on a number of duties and quotas and rules to access export markets.
Give me a concrete example.
I give you one very concrete example. Royal Ballet of Cambodia.
Okay.
You know, there was a representation not long ago here in the
Chattamuk.
Chaktomuk.
Yes.
Right. So they have shows all around the world, right? When they go around the world presenting Cambodia's art scene, they have to get visa, they have to get authorizations, they have to get permit to travel around, to bring their stuff, to bring their goods for the shows. Okay, if they negotiate through this LDC services waiver with countries that would benefit, I mean, from the shows, say in Europe,
Yes.
Japan, and
Yes.
the US, some of those countries have already indicated that they were ready to waive certain fees, quotas, and duties for countries like Cambodia, for LDCs.
Very, very interesting.
But Cambodia has not made use of this opportunity yet. And this applies to many other different sectors. The thing is, for the moment, services in Cambodia are exported mainly in the region.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
So in ASEAN,
Yeah.
China. So
And very soon with the ASEP, with the ASEAN Plus 6.
exactly. So there is room for Cambodia, and especially for the private sector,
Yeah.
because it's the private sector who should come to the government and say, look, we have this opportunity in that country. We want to avail of this opportunity. Please help us negotiate with that country
Yes.
so that we can have access to this market. So there is indeed in the fintech, in the e-commerce sector, it's booming. Right? And when I travel to Myanmar and Laos, I'm happy to see Asilida, I'm happy to see Canada Bank
Yes.
with branches there, and also offering innovative products like they did in Cambodia years back. So this is a good trend for economic diversification,
Yes.
moving into services, increasing the contribution of services
Yes.
through the gross domestic product of Cambodia.
No, it's very good. Nick, from the UN family perspective, you know, in terms of working with the government, shape up some development policy, you know, so that eventually we can move toward a smooth graduation. What area are you working on now, as a UN family?
Well, I think, I would say almost all of our work is relevant in some ways to graduation,
Yes.
because of its relevance through the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yes.
I think of the work that, say, UNICEF or UNESCO do on
Yes.
education, bringing up the skill sets and so on, and ourselves in UNDP working with a number of UN agencies on youth employment.
Yes.
What else? Cassava value chain is another one that we're looking at. So, cassava is about 4% of GDP. I mean, quite a lot less than, say, the rice exports, but it's still a very large sector. A lot that can be done there. In terms of value added and increasing the productivity,
Yes.
and looking at the policy, looking at the strategy, and working with government through there. We've also doing a lot of work on the sustainable development front. For example, through Ministry of Environment and climate change proofing a lot of the infrastructure investments that government is making, so that when you're building roads and you're doing other infrastructure projects, that you make sure that you take account of the climate change adaptation need, and that way you can save yourself a lot of time and money moving forward. You get a much better return upon your investment. But I mean, I could speak for much longer than you'd want me to speak if I had to try to say what is the relevance of the UN's work to graduation. But I'd say there's a lot there. Focusing on the
go ahead.
I think it's a testimony also of the progress that Cambodia has made over the past 10 years. Because 10 years ago, development partners were not into industrial development, were not into services, were not into, not so many of them, into the sectors that Nick has just mentioned. And when you graduate, you need to have, as a country, you need to have this dialogue with your development partners, because some of them will just go when you become a LDC graduated and graduate country. They will tell you, well, you're rich, you're too rich now, so we leave you. Others will come and have different sources of financing.
Yes. We're running out of time, but I'm going to pop the magic question. When do you expect that we will graduate? Nick?
I was hoping you were going to ask him first. No, I think okay. So the meeting is in March now, and quite what the 24 members, of the Committee for Development Policy and the Royal Government of Cambodia will decide is for that meeting. So we can't really say right now. We would have to be compliant on at least 2 of the 3 criteria to enter into the cycle.
Yes.
Now, whether that happens this year or the next meeting is triennial, so it's 2021. I think if it's not this one, it's definitely the next one, I would say. Looking at those 3 indicators, it's almost inevitable, either this one or the next one. Once you're in, you're looking at another meeting in order to negotiate the criteria. Then you're looking at 2 more meetings that you have to cross. To meet to meet the criteria. So if you went ahead, say this year or 2021, then you're looking late 2020s, 2030 maybe for graduation. I mean, you're looking at least a 9-year timescale. Right. That would be my guess.
Sven, I'll be retired by then, but for you, you're still young, so you're still around for the next 10 years. What happened after that?
Right. So it's first you have to celebrate, because it's hard work. But maybe I'll draw a parallel with something you know very well, which is the WTO accession of Cambodia. Started in '94, you ended negotiation in 2003 and ratified in 2004. So it's like a 10-year period. And remember at that time, and you were in the government side, I was in the UN side at the time, where we were trying to help. And question like this were constantly asked us, like, when are we going to graduate, and what happened the day we graduate? Is everybody going to come here and invest?
Magic wand.
Are we going to get new donors to come here, etc.? And the answer was like, take your time, right? And it's your own decision, it's your own drive. Do it when you're ready. Some countries have been negotiated the WTO accession for more than 25 years. Cambodia did very, very fast, right? So it's the same with graduation. Is sooner the better? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think instead of saying, well, this is a huge milestone that we have to reach by that date, let's use, as you did for the WTO very well, let's use the process to engage dialogue with the private sector, with the development partners. Also look at their own government capacities, Like if you look at Samoa, for instance, they say some of the services that cannot be run efficiently in the government, we subcontract, we commission to the private sector, to the civil sector, etc. So this is a very useful period to reflect, right? To say where we shall go, what market are we targeting, what economic development we want. In the end, if you are a graduate, then you can say, well, we are a sovereign country. We don't depend on this waiver. We don't depend on the special and differential treatment for LDCs. We are the master of our own development. So when Cambodia is ready to do this, then we should celebrate.
Well, gentlemen, it's too short to cover a topic that will take us another 10 years to realize. But I think we planted the seed of reflection, and I'm glad that the UN family has always been supporting Cambodia from even in the rehabilitation stage, in the post Paris Peace Accord, then in the development stage, now helping us go to the next phase of our life. Which is quite important to have such a strong partnership with the government, and I'm pleased to hear that the UN family is very much behind that. And Sven, as a friend of Cambodia from the WTO days, now you move to other things, but I think you're still in the trade area. For me, I think the WTO has an impact on our development process. It's interesting that in the street, in the business, people still recall the WTO days. The trick is how to sustain this economic liberalization philosophy, this openness, embracing trade liberalization, that sort of thing, not go backward, right? And I think it's important that we continue this dialogue, to make sure that the next generation, particularly the young entrepreneur, because in 10 years' time, they're no more young. They will move from entrepreneur, some will be a mid-sized company that can compete. And this is what I really want that message across, is that, guys, we give ourselves 10 solid years to build our competitiveness. That's for the entrepreneur. For the government, Excellency, we have 10 years to develop solid policy, of diversification, of rethinking the paradigm. How do we deal with our development partner as they shift from a development reconstruction development mode into a more advanced competitive fourth industrial revolution age, this sort of thing, So I think I'm enriched by this discussion. Yes.
But you said that you're going to be retired soon, which I cannot believe.
Okay.
But I think it might be a good opportunity for you to take back your shepherd baton that you had like 20 years ago.
Yes.
And go under the mango tree and then did the same thing you did for the WTO.
Yes.
Meaning disseminate, raise awareness on what it is to be a graduated economy and what it will mean for the farmers, for the processor, for the governments. Because this was very effective. I mean, I went one with you there, and
yes.
I saw the difference.
Yeah.
Layman speech.
Yes.
Explaining to everyone. So please don't
Thank you,
retire soon.
Thank you, Nick. You're not gonna run away, because I have a few ideas I want to bring you back, particularly on renewable energy.
Pleasure.
All right. Well, we're coming to the end of the program, and I won't bother summarizing the discussion. It's too rich. All I'm saying is that we're on the right track, but let's not lay down our guard. We still have a lot of work ahead, to sustain this development growth. But I think we have a lot of good element in place already in terms of good policy, in terms of partnership with our friends, in the bilaterally speaking, multilaterally speaking, we're there. And the goal is that Cambodia will have to sustain this path of this journey, to bring prosperity for a country that 2-3 decades ago only knew poverty and misery. It's time to change that paradigm. Thank you and good night.